The body hit the polished airport floor with a sound that stopped everything. A wet, brutal thud that echoed through Terminal C like a gunshot. 200 travelers froze mid-step. A woman screamed. Then someone saw the desert camouflage uniform sprawled across the tile, and the paralysis deepened. Nobody moved. Nobody helped. Just phones rising like a field of dead flowers, recording a Navy SEAL dying in front of them. Until one exhausted nurse in coffee-stained scrubs dropped to her knees and broke every hospital policy that mattered. 48 hours later, they fired her for it. What happened next burned that hospital to the ground. Before we begin, I need you to do something for me. Stay with this story until the very end, because what unfolds will restore your faith in justice. If this story moves you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Kara's story can reach across this country. Now, let's begin. The fluorescent lights of Cedar Valley Regional Medical Center buzzed like dying insects as Kara Mitchell shoved through the emergency department doors at 6:47 a.m., 11 minutes late for a shift that should have ended yesterday. Her navy scrubs were wrinkled from sleeping in her car during a double that bled into a triple, her dark hair escaping its ponytail in defeated strands. The coffee in her travel mug had gone cold 3 hours ago, but she kept drinking it anyway, the bitterness matching her mood. "You're late." Charge nurse Sylvia Brennan didn't look up from her clipboard, her voice carrying that particular brand of satisfaction people get from catching others failing. She stood at the nurse's station like a sentry, her perfectly pressed white coat a reproach to everyone around her. Kara bit back the obvious response, that she'd worked 22 hours straight because Sylvia had called in sick again, and simply nodded. "Car trouble. Write it up." Sylvia thrust an incident report form across the counter. "Director Hastings wants documentation on all tardiness." Director Rachel Hastings. The woman who'd transformed nursing from a calling into a minefield of policies, protocols, and paperwork designed to protect the hospital from lawsuits rather than help patients. Kara had watched good nurses quit over the past 18 months as Hastings implemented her efficiency measures, which mostly meant fewer staff doing more work for less money while administrators got bonuses. Kara took the form without comment and headed to the break room to dump her bag. Inside, 2 other nurses were huddled over their phones, watching something that made them gasp. "Did you see this?" Jenny Cortez turned the screen toward Kara. "Some guy collapsed at Riverside International, just dropped in the middle of the terminal." The video was already viral. Shaky footage of a massive man in military fatigues lying motionless on airport tile while hundreds of people stood in a circle, filming. Nobody helping, nobody moving, just documenting. Kara felt her stomach turn. Someone call 911? Eventually, but look, 3 minutes and counting, nobody doing CPR. Just standing there. The comment section was already filling with the usual internet poison. "Not my problem. Could be a lawsuit. What if he's dangerous? Someone else will help." Kara turned away. She had enough dying to deal with in front of her without watching people fail each other on their phones. The shift started the way they all did lately. Understaffed and underwater. 2 nurses had called out, meaning Kara was covering 16 patients instead of 8. Each one sicker than hospital policy officially allowed in a non-ICU setting. But beds were full, the ICU was overflowing, and Director Hastings had made it crystal clear that resource optimization meant making do. Room 7 was a diabetic crisis. Room 11 was chest pain they were monitoring because the cardiology consult would take 4 hours. Room 14 was a post-surgical infection that should have been caught days ago, but wasn't, because nursing ratios made real patient assessment impossible. Kara moved through them mechanically, her hands competent even as exhaustion made her vision swim. She'd been a nurse for 12 years, an ER nurse for 8, and she was good at it. But Cedar Valley Regional was grinding her down like everyone else, stripping away the parts of the job that mattered and replacing them with liability protocols. At 9:15 a.m., her phone buzzed. Her daughter Mia texting from school. "Science fair is today. You coming?" Kara's heart cracked cleanly down the middle. She'd completely forgotten. Mia was 10, brilliant and patient, and she'd been working on her solar panel project for 3 months. Kara had promised to be there. "I'm so sorry, baby," Still at work? I'll make it up to you, I promise. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No response. Kara leaned against the wall outside room 11, fighting back tears she didn't have time for. This was the cost nobody talked about. The slow erosion of being present for your own life while the hospital extracted every hour it could. Mitchell. Sylvia's voice cut through the moment like a scalpel. Room 9 needs vitals, and Hastings wants to see you during lunch. No lunch break then. Kara pushed off the wall and kept moving. By 11 a.m., she was running on autopilot and spiked. Her lower back screamed from lifting patients without proper help. Her feet throbbed in shoes that needed replacing. But the patients kept coming, sicker and sicker, because the hospital kept accepting admissions even when they had no capacity to handle them safely. She was checking a medication order when she overheard Sylvia talking to one of the new nurses. Her voice pitched just loud enough to carry. Some nurses think the rules don't apply to them, think they can just do whatever feels right in the moment. That's how people get sued. That's how hospitals lose their licenses. A pointed pause. That's how nurses lose their jobs. The new nurse, barely 23, still idealistic, glanced nervously at Kara. Kara didn't take the bait. She'd learned that Sylvia fed on confrontation, used it to build her little empire of control. Instead, she focused on the order, caught a potentially fatal dosage error, and corrected it without fanfare, saving lives quietly while Sylvia performed competence. At noon, Kara stood outside Director Hastings' office, still in her stained scrubs, while Hastings finished a phone call about quarterly metrics. Through the glass wall, Kara could see the framed diplomas, the leadership awards, the photos with local politicians, all the trappings of someone who'd stopped seeing patients as people and started seeing them as data points. Hastings waved her in without looking up. Sit. Kara remained standing, a small rebellion, but hers. Hastings finally met her eyes, her expression professionally blank. She was 52, expensively dressed, and had the kind of calculated warmth that made smart people nervous. We need to discuss your performance metrics. Your patient satisfaction scores are below target. Kara blinked. She had some of the lowest complication rates in the department, the highest medication accuracy, and consistently caught critical errors other nurses missed. But metrics weren't about care. They were about whether patients felt delighted by their emergency room experience, as if a medical crisis should come with hotel hospitality. I've been picking up extra shifts, Kara said evenly, covering for call-outs, working with patient ratios that violate safe staffing guidelines. We all make sacrifices. Hastings' smile was surgical. But the hospital has standards. We need team players who understand that protocols exist for a reason. Nurses who color outside the lines create liability exposure. There it was, the real message. Fall in line or fall out. I need this job, Kara said quietly. Single mother, drowning in debt, no safety net. I'll work on the metrics. See that you do. Hastings returned to her computer, dismissal complete. Oh, and Kara, your next performance review is in 6 weeks. I'd hate to see you not make it. Kara left the office feeling like she'd been slowly poisoned. This was the game now, not medicine, but managed care theater, where nurses performed compliance and administrators collected bonuses, while patients became widgets in a profit formula. She grabbed her bag from the break room, decided she'd take her mandated lunch in her car where she could cry in private, and headed for the parking garage. The afternoon sun was brutal, heat radiating off the asphalt in waves. She was fumbling for her keys when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her thumb the green button. Kara Mitchell? A crisp, professional voice. Speaking. This is Administrator Walsh from Riverside International Airport. We have a medical emergency in Terminal C, and you're the closest available healthcare provider registered in our database. Are you able to respond? Kara's exhaustion evaporated, replaced by something sharper. I'm not on duty. I just finished. Ma'am, we have a man in cardiac arrest. No pulse, no respiration. TSA and Airport Fire are attempting CPR, but they're not trained medical personnel. We need help. Now. The address was 12 minutes away. Kara was already running for her car. She broke every speed limit getting there, her beat-up Honda weaving through midday traffic while her mind raced through protocols. No equipment, no backup, no idea what she was walking into. Just muscle memory and 12 years of emergency training kicking in like a second heartbeat. The airport was chaos. Security had cordoned off Terminal C, travelers pressed against the barriers filming on their phones, the same sick voyeurism she'd seen in that morning's viral video. Kara flashed her nursing license at the TSA checkpoint, and a young officer waved her through, his face gray with stress. "He's this way. Hurry!" The crowd parted and Kara saw him, 6'3", maybe 220 pounds of pure muscle, sprawled on his back in desert camouflage fatigues. A massive tactical duffel lay a few feet away, content spilling out. His skin was ashen, lips blue, eyes half open and unseen. 2 airport firefighters were doing compressions, but their rhythm was off, too shallow, not breaking through the wall of his chest. Kara dropped to her knees beside him, her hands automatically finding his carotid. No pulse. She ripped open his shirt, buttons scattering across tile, and laced her fingers over his sternum. "How long has he been down?" she demanded. "Maybe 4 minutes," one firefighter gasped, giving up his position. "We got here 2 minutes ago." 4 minutes. Brain damage started at 6. Kara locked her elbows and drove down hard, fast, perfect rhythm. 100 compressions per minute, 2 inches deep, driving blood to his brain by sheer force. Sweat broke across her forehead. Her shoulders screamed. "Someone call 911 if you haven't already," she snapped at the crowd. "And get me an AED. Every terminal has one." A TSA officer sprinted away. Kara kept compressing, counting under her breath, feeling his ribs flex under her palms. This close, she could see details. Tattoos on his forearms, a special warfare operator badge on his chest, a wedding ring on his left hand. Someone's husband. Someone's father, maybe. Not today. Not on my watch. 30 compressions. She tilted his head back, pinched his nose, sealed her mouth over his and gave 2 rescue breaths. His chest rose, airway clear. Back to compressions. Someone shoved an AED into view. Kara ripped the pads from the package with her teeth, slapped them onto his bare chest while she kept compressing one-handed. The machine whined to life. Analyzing rhythm. "Do not touch the patient." Kara pulled back. 2 seconds felt like hours. "Shock advised. Stand clear." She made sure no one was touching him, then hit the button. His body jerked like he'd been hit by lightning, back arching off the floor. The AED beeped. "Continue CPR." Kara dove back in. Compression so hard her knuckles went white. 15 seconds. 30. 45. "Come on, come on!" And then, impossible, miraculous, he gasped. Not a breath. A drowning man breaking the surface, his whole body convulsing as his lungs remembered their job. His eyes flew open, wild and unfocused, and his hand shot up and grabbed Kara's wrist with terrifying strength. "Easy," she said, keeping her voice low and steady even as her heart hammered. "You're okay. You're at Riverside Airport. You collapsed. I'm a nurse. You're safe now." His grip loosened fractionally. His chest heaved, color flooding back into his face in splotches. The crowd erupted in applause and Kara wanted to scream at them to shut up, to give him space, to stop treating a man's near-death like entertainment. Paramedics crashed through the barrier, 2 of them, with a stretcher and a jump bag. Kara gave them a rapid-fire report. Approximate downtime, CPR performed, AED shock delivered, return of spontaneous circulation. They worked around her, getting him on oxygen, establishing an IV, loading him onto the stretcher. As they wheeled him away, his eyes found hers. Just for a second. Something passed between them, gratitude, recognition, something deeper than words. Then he was gone, swallowed by the ambulance bay, sirens already wailing. Kara sat back on her heels, her scrubs soaked with sweat, her hands shaking with adrenaline crash. Around her, phones were still recording, still filming, turning her into content. The TSA officer who'd called her appeared at her elbow. "That was incredible. You saved his life." Kara shook her head. "Just doing what any nurse would do." But even as she said it, she remembered that morning's video. All those people standing in a circle, watching someone die doing nothing. Maybe what she'd done wasn't what any nurse would do. Maybe it was just what she couldn't stop herself from doing, no matter the cost. She gave a brief statement to airport security, declined their offer to call someone for her, and walked back to her car on legs that felt like water. She was supposed to go back to Cedar Valley for the second half of her shift, but her hands were still trembling too badly to trust with patient care. She called the charge desk. Sylvia answered. "I need to take the rest of the day," Kara said. "I responded to an emergency at the airport. Cardiac arrest. I'm not in shape to work." Silence. Then, ice cold. "That's an unauthorized absence. You'll need to submit documentation." "Someone almost died, Sylvia." "Not our patient. Not our liability. You left hospital grounds during your shift. That's abandonment." Kara hung up before she said something that would get her fired on the spot. She drove home in a daze, the adrenaline finally ebbing and leaving her hollow. Her apartment was quiet. Mia was still at school, at the science fair Kara had missed. Another promise broken. Another way she was failing at being present. She showered, scrubbing airport floor grime from her skin, and changed into clean clothes. Made herself eat something even though everything tasted like cardboard. Tried not to think about Sylvia's voice, about Hastings' veiled threats, about the fact that she'd probably just given them all the ammunition they needed. By the time Mia came home at 4 p.m., Kara had almost convinced herself it would be fine. "How was the science fair, sweetheart?" Mia dropped her backpack and wouldn't meet Kara's eyes. "Fine." "Did you win anything?" "Third place." Still not looking at her. "That's wonderful. I'm so proud of—" Emma's mom was there, and Jacob's dad, and pretty much everyone's parents except mine. Mia's voice was flat, practiced hurt. "But it's fine. You had to work. You always have to work." The words hit like physical blows. Kara reached for her daughter, but Mia pulled away, heading for her room. "I'm sorry, baby. I tried to—" "I know. You always try." The bedroom door closed with a quiet click that was worse than slamming. Kara stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of a life barely held together, bills stacked on the counter, laundry overflowing the basket, a calendar marked with shifts that bled into each other. She'd saved a man's life today. She was an excellent nurse, and she was slowly losing her daughter to a system that demanded everything and gave nothing back. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Jenny, from the ER. You need to see this. A link to a news site." Kara clicked it, and her stomach dropped. The headline read, "Local nurse saves Navy SEAL at Riverside Airport." Below it, a photo someone had taken. Kara in her stained scrubs, hands locked on the soldier's chest, her face set in fierce concentration. The article described the rescue in breathless detail, included eyewitness quotes calling her a hero, mentioned that she worked at Cedar Valley Regional. And at the bottom, already generating hundreds of comments, a statement from the hospital. "Cedar Valley Regional Medical Center is investigating an incident involving one of our nurses who allegedly engaged in unauthorized medical intervention while off hospital premises. Patient safety and protocol compliance are our highest priorities. We take these matters extremely seriously and will be conducting a full review." Kara read it 3 times, her hands going numb. They weren't celebrating her, they were investigating her. She was still staring at the screen when her phone rang. Director Hastings, calling at 6 p.m. on her personal line. Kara answered with a voice that didn't shake. "Hello? We need to talk, tonight. Can you come to my office? I'm off duty, and I have my daughter." "This can't wait." Hastings' tone was granite. 30 minutes. Don't make me tell you twice." The line went dead. Kara stood in her kitchen, the enormity of it settling over her like ice water. She'd saved a man's life, performed flawless emergency care under impossible conditions, and her reward was a disciplinary meeting. She called her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who agreed to watch Mia. Kissed her daughter's forehead through the bedroom door when Mia wouldn't come out, and drove back to the hospital with a feeling in her gut like falling. Hastings' office was dark except for a single desk lamp, creating shadows that made the space feel like an interrogation room. The director sat behind her desk, Sylvia Brennan standing beside her like an executioner's assistant. "Sit," Hastings said. Kara sat. "Do you understand why you're here? I saved a man's life today. You left hospital property during your assigned shift without authorization. You performed medical care outside the scope of your employment. You exposed this hospital to catastrophic liability." Hastings slid a piece of paper across the desk. This is a formal letter of suspension pending investigation. Effective immediately. You're to surrender your badge and access card. The room tilted. You're suspending me for performing CPR? We're suspending you for violating hospital policy. What you did was reckless, unsupervised, and created legal exposure we cannot tolerate. He was dying. There were 200 people standing around filming and no one helped. I'm a nurse. I took an oath. Sylvia spoke for the first time, her voice dripping satisfaction. Your oath is to this hospital, to our policies, to the chain of command, not to random strangers at the airport. Kara looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the truth. This wasn't about policy. This was about control, about a system so broken, so consumed by liability fears and bureaucratic power, that saving a life had become an act of insubordination. I'd do it again, Kara said quietly. Every single time. Hastings' expression went cold. Then you fundamentally misunderstand your role here. Nurses follow protocols. They don't freelance. They don't play hero. She stood, signaling the end of the conversation. You have 48 hours to respond to these charges in writing. Until then, you're barred from hospital property. Security will escort you out. And just like that, Kara Mitchell, 12 years of flawless service, countless lives saved, one of the best ER nurses Cedar Valley had ever had, was being walked out of the building like a criminal. The security guard at least had the grace to look embarrassed. In the parking garage, Kara sat in her car and finally let herself feel it. The rage, the disbelief, the bone-deep exhaustion of fighting a system designed to grind people down. She'd saved a Navy SEAL's life, and they were punishing her for it. Her phone buzzed, another news alert. The video had gone viral. Millions of views in 6 hours. #NurseHero was trending. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. People were calling her brave, incredible, a real-life superhero. None of them knew she'd just been suspended. She drove home through streets blurred by tears she refused to shed until she was safely behind her own door. Paid Mrs. Chen from money she couldn't afford to spend. Checked on Mia, who was asleep with her science fair ribbon on her nightstand. Third place, which would have been first if her mother had been there to help her practice the presentation. Kara sat on her couch in the dark, her nursing career hanging by a thread, her daughter pulling away, her bills mounting, and tried to figure out how saving someone's life had turned into the worst decision she'd ever made. Across town, in a cardiac ICU bed, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Reed was awake for the first time in 8 hours. The doctors said he'd had a sudden cardiac event, ventricular fibrillation, the kind that kills most people who get it outside a hospital. They said someone had performed perfect CPR, shocked him with an AED, kept his brain alive long enough for the paramedics to arrive. They said he was alive because of a nurse whose name they didn't know. Marcus stared at the ceiling, his chest aching where ribs had been compressed, and made himself a promise. He was going to find her. He was going to thank her. And if the universe had any justice left in it, he was going to make sure she knew that what she'd done mattered. He had no idea he was already too late. The hospital's legal team was already preparing their defense. Director Hastings was already drafting the termination paperwork. And Sylvia Brennan was already spreading the story through the nursing grapevine. This is what happens when you break the rules. This is what happens when you think you're special. But somewhere in the viral machinery of the internet, the video kept spreading. And people kept asking questions. Who was this nurse? Why wasn't the hospital celebrating her? And what kind of system punishes someone for saving a life? The answers were coming. But first, Kara Mitchell had to survive the next 48 hours without losing everything she'd worked for. And the clock was already ticking. The answers arrived at 6:47 a.m. the next morning, delivered not as revelation, but as demolition. Kara hadn't slept. She'd spent the night drafting and redrafting her written response to the suspension, each version weaker than the last, because how do you defend saving a life to people who see it as insubordination? Around 3 a.m., she'd given up and just sat at her kitchen table watching the video views climb past 3 million, reading comments from strangers who called her a hero while her own employer prepared to destroy her career. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered anyway because at this point, what did she have to lose? Is this Kara Mitchell? Male voice, unfamiliar, formal. Yes. This is Bradley Vance from Channel 7 News. We'd like to interview you about the airport rescue. The public is demanding to know why Cedar Valley Regional suspended you for saving a Navy SEAL's life. Kara's blood went cold. How do you know about the suspension? We have our sources. Ms. Mitchell, people are outraged. They're calling the hospital, flooding social media, demanding answers. This is a major story. Will you comment? She hung up. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. It took 30 seconds for the full horror to register. The suspension was supposed to be internal, confidential, giving her time to mount a defense. Someone had leaked it. Someone wanted this to be public, wanted her humiliation to be complete. Her phone exploded. Texts from coworkers, some supportive, most carefully neutral. Voicemails from 3 different news stations. An email from a lawyer offering pro bono representation. The video had been picked up by national outlets now, paired with the leaked suspension story, and the narrative was writing itself. Heartless hospital punishes heroic nurse. Kara wanted to scream that it wasn't that simple, that she understood why policies existed, that she wasn't trying to be a martyr. But the machinery of outrage doesn't do nuance. It needs villains and heroes. And Cedar Valley Regional had just cast themselves perfectly. Mia emerged from her bedroom, already in her school uniform, her face carefully blank. Everyone's talking about it. About what? About you. There's a video Emma showed me in the group chat. She poured cereal with mechanical precision, not meeting Kara's eyes. Is it true they fired you? Suspended. It's different. Is it? Mia's voice carried an edge Kara had never heard before. Something harder than her 10 years should contain. Because you still can't pay the bills. You still can't come to my stuff. And now everyone knows. The accusation landed like a blade between Kara's ribs. I did the right thing. The right thing. Mia set down her spoon with a click that sounded like a gavel. The right thing is having a mom who's actually here, not some hero everyone else gets to celebrate while I eat cereal alone. She grabbed her backpack and walked out without another word, leaving Kara alone with the wreckage of good intentions. By 8 a.m., the hospital's phone system had crashed from call volume. By 9 a.m., protesters had gathered outside Cedar Valley Regional with hand-painted signs. Heroes don't deserve punishment and save nurses, not paperwork. By 10 a.m., Director Hastings was in an emergency meeting with the hospital's legal team and public relations crisis manager, while the CEO demanded to know how this had become a national incident. Kara knew none of this yet. She was sitting in her parked car outside a coffee shop she couldn't afford, trying to draft an email to Hastings that didn't sound like begging, when someone knocked on her window. She nearly jumped out of her skin. The man standing there was massive, 6'3", military posture, a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and then weathered by things Kara couldn't imagine. He wore civilian clothes but carried himself like a weapon, and his eyes were the pale blue of Arctic ice. He gestured for her to roll down the window. Every instinct screamed danger, but something in his expression stopped her from driving away. She cracked the window 2 inches. Kara Mitchell? His voice was gravel wrapped in smoke. Who's asking? Chief Petty Officer Marcus Reed, Navy Special Warfare. You saved my life 2 days ago at Riverside Airport. He held up his hands, showing he was unarmed. I need 5 minutes, please. The airport. The soldier in desert camo. The man whose heart had stopped under her hands. Kara unlocked the door. Marcus folded himself into the passenger seat with surprising grace for someone his size. Up close, she could see the shadows under his eyes. The hospital bracelet still on his wrist. The slight tremor in his hands that spoke of a body still recovering from catastrophic trauma. You shouldn't be out of the hospital, she said. Kisa. Discharged myself against medical advice. I had something more important to do. He turned to face her fully. I needed to find the woman who brought me back from the dead and tell her thank you. Kara's throat closed. You don't need to... Yes, I do. I died. My heart stopped. I was gone, and you refused to let me stay that way. His voice dropped, raw with emotion he didn't try to hide. I have a wife, 2 daughters, 8 and 6. They were going to get a flag and a folded uniform because my body decided to quit in an airport terminal. Instead, they got me back. Because you. The tears Kara had been holding back for 36 hours finally broke through. She covered her face with her hands. shaking with sobs she'd been too numb to allow herself. Marcus waited, patient as stone, until she could breathe again. "I'm sorry," she managed. "I don't usually—" "Don't apologize. You've earned the right to fall apart." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "I also needed to give you this." Kara unfolded it. A handwritten letter on hospital stationery, Marcus's wife's name at the bottom, Jennifer Reed, thanking her in words that made Kara's chest ache, promising that their daughters would grow up knowing her name, knowing that courage looked like a tired nurse who refused to walk away. "That's beautiful," Kara whispered. "It's true. And speaking of true, what the hell is this about your hospital suspending you?" Kara's walls went up instantly. "It's complicated. Policy violations, liability concerns. I left my shift without authorization. You saved my life. Outside the scope of my employment, creating legal exposure for the hospital. I understand why—" "Stop." Marcus's voice carried the weight of command, the kind that made trained operators freeze mid-motion. "Stop defending them. You did nothing wrong. You did everything right. And they're punishing you for it because they care more about their asses than doing what's decent." Kara wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. Because somewhere in the past 2 years, Cedar Valley Regional had stopped being about healing and started being about risk management. And she'd been drowning in it so long, she'd forgotten what solid ground felt like. "It doesn't matter anymore," she said quietly. "The story leaked. It's gone national. Even if they wanted to quietly discipline me, it's too late. They'll have to fire me now to save face." Marcus was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried something new, something cold and calculating. "How long have you been a nurse?" 12 years, 8 in emergency medicine. Your record?" "Spotless. Until now." "Family?" "Daughter, 10 years old. I'm all she has." Marcus nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call, right there in her passenger seat. "Commander Reeves, it's Marcus. I need a favor." He listened, then, "The nurse who saved me at Riverside? Hospital's trying to bury her for it. I need you to make some calls." Another pause. "No, not threats. Information. I want to know every donor, every board member, every politician who's ever taken a photo op at Cedar Valley Regional. And I want it yesterday." He hung up and turned back to Kara. "You might want to hire that lawyer who called you. I can't afford— He'll work pro bono for the publicity alone. This story has legs, and I'm about to make sure it runs all the way to the governor's office." Kara stared at him. "Why would you do this?" "Because you gave me back my life. Because what they're doing to you is wrong. And because I'm very good at breaking things that need to be broken." His smile was absolutely terrifying. "I'm not some random civilian you pulled off the street, Ms. Mitchell. I'm special warfare. I have resources, connections, and a very particular set of skills that includes making powerful people extremely uncomfortable." Before Kara could respond, both their phones buzzed simultaneously. News alert. Cedar Valley Regional faces firestorm over nurse suspension. Marcus read the article, his expression darkening. They just released a statement doubling down, saying patient safety requires strict protocol compliance. They're trying to spin this like you're the problem. Kara felt sick. "I should call them, try to fix this." "No, you should let me handle it." He handed her a card with just a phone number. "That's my personal line, 24/7. Anything happens, you call me. Understood?" She took the card with numb fingers. This was surreal. Yesterday she was worried about making rent. Today, a Navy SEAL was offering to wage war on her behalf. Marcus climbed out of the car, then leaned back in through the window. "One more thing. That letter from my wife? She wrote it from our hotel room. We live in Virginia Beach. I flew here yesterday, still wearing a hospital monitor, because I needed to look you in the eye when I said thank you." He straightened. "You're worth fighting for, Kara Mitchell. It's time you started believing that." He walked away, moving like a predator, despite the hospital bracelet, leaving Kara sitting in her car with tears streaming down her face and something dangerous blooming in her chest that felt like hope. She went home and did 3 things. First, she called the pro bono lawyer, Daniel Ortega, aggressive and brilliant and hungry for exactly this kind of fight. Second, she wrote an email to Director Hastings that was professional, measured, and refused to apologize for saving a life. Third, she made Mia her favorite dinner and actually sat down to eat it with her. No phone, no distractions, just being present. "Why are you acting weird?" Mia asked suspiciously. "Because I missed you, because I'm sorry, because I'm trying to do better." Mia studied her for a long moment. "Are you going to lose your job?" "Probably." "Then what?" Kara had been asking herself the same question. "Then we figure it out. Together. The way we always have." It wasn't much, but it was true. And for the first time in days, Mia's expression softened. That night, while Mia slept, Kara watched the story metastasize across social media. Someone had created a GoFundMe for her legal defense that had already raised $40,000. A nurses' union was issuing statements calling for her reinstatement. Marcus's wife had done a televised interview describing the moment she learned her husband was alive, crediting Kara by name. And Cedar Valley Regional kept digging their hole deeper. Their PR team released a video statement from Director Hastings, professionally lit and perfectly scripted. "While we appreciate the public's concern, our primary obligation is to our patients and our protocols. Nurses who operate outside established guidelines, regardless of outcome, create unacceptable risk. We stand by our decision." The comments section exploded. 15,000 responses in an hour, 98% hostile. Nurses from across the country sharing their own stories of being punished for caring too much, for staying too late, for putting patients before policy. The narrative was shifting from one nurse's suspension to a systemic indictment of healthcare management. At 11 p.m., Kara's phone rang. "Marcus, turn on Channel 7, now." She grabbed the remote. The late news was running a special investigation. When hospitals punish heroes. They'd interviewed former Cedar Valley employees, 5 nurses who'd left in the past year, all citing the same issues. Impossible ratios, retaliation for speaking up, a culture of fear under Hastings' leadership. One nurse, nearly in tears, described being written up for staying 2 hours past her shift to comfort a dying patient because it counted as unauthorized overtime. Another told how she'd been suspended for questioning a doctor's medication order that would have killed a child. She was right, the order was wrong, but she'd violated the chain of command. The segment ended with Kara's airport video and a direct question to the hospital. "Is this who you want to be?" Kara's phone exploded. Texts, calls, emails. But one message stood out, from an address she didn't recognize, sent at 11:47 p.m. Some of us still remember what nursing is supposed to be. You're not alone. A friend inside. She stared at it for a long time, wondering who at Cedar Valley had enough courage to risk sending it. The answer came at 6 a.m. the next morning, delivered by a knock on her apartment door. Kara opened it to find Jenny Cortez, one of the younger ER nurses, holding 2 coffees and looking like she hadn't slept. Behind her stood 3 other nurses Kara recognized from the hospital, all of them in street clothes, all of them with the same exhausted determination in their eyes. "We quit," Jenny said without preamble. "All of us. This morning. We're not working for people who do this to nurses who save lives." Kara's mouth fell open. "Jenny, you can't. You need this job." "No." Jenny's voice was firm. "I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror. I need to work somewhere that doesn't treat compassion like a liability." She held out one of the coffees. "We wanted you to know before it hits the news. Hastings is about to have a staffing crisis she can't spin." The other nurses nodded. One of them, Sarah Chen, a veteran with 20 years' experience, stepped forward. "We've been watching this place rot for 2 years. You were just the excuse we needed to finally walk away." Kara took the coffee with shaking hands. "The hospital will destroy you for this. Let them try. We've already got job offers at Mercy General. They called us last night after seeing the news, said they're hiring nurses who actually give a damn." Jenny's smile was fierce. "Turns out doing the right thing is actually pretty good for your career." They left 20 minutes later, leaving Kara alone with the knowledge that her suspension had just triggered a mass exodus. The story hit the news cycle by 8 a.m. 4 nurses resign in protest of suspended colleague. By noon, it was 6. By 2 p.m., it was 9. By evening, Cedar Valley Regional's emergency department was running on skeleton crew and travel nurses, and the hospital was hemorrhaging staff faster than they could replace them. Director Hastings called an emergency all-staff meeting, tried to spin it as difficult employees who couldn't meet professional standards. But the nurses who remained, the ones who couldn't afford to quit, who had families and mortgages and no safety net, weren't buying it. Kara heard about it from Sarah, who texted her the details. Meeting had devolved into shouting, accusations, one nurse telling Hastings to her face that she'd destroyed everything good about Cedar Valley. The hospital's legal team was in full crisis mode. The CEO was fielding calls from board members demanding to know why a simple personnel matter had turned into a public relations catastrophe. And somewhere in the chaos, someone made a decision. At 7:33 p.m., Kara received an official email from Human Resources. She read it 3 times, her hands going numb. The suspension was lifted, effective immediately. They were offering her reinstatement with full back pay, a formal apology, and a promotion to senior clinical nurse with a 15% raise. The email was professionally worded, carefully neutral, and absolutely reeked of desperation. Kara called Daniel Ortega, her new lawyer. "They're trying to make this go away," he said immediately. "Don't accept yet. We have leverage." "What kind of leverage?" "The kind where you've become a national symbol, and they're bleeding money every day. This continues. Push for more. Policy changes. Staffing improvements. Make them fix the system, not just reinstate you." But Kara was thinking about Mia, about the bills, about the fact that fighting felt good in principle, but practical reality was a single mother with no income and mounting debt. "I need to think about it," she said. That night, Marcus called again. "I heard about the offer. What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to tell them where they can shove their promotion. Part of me just wants my life back." "Your life back?" Marcus's voice was gentle. "Is that really what Cedar Valley gives you, or just a paycheck in exchange for slow death by 1,000 policies?" Kara didn't answer because she didn't have to. They both knew. "There's something else," Marcus said. "Someone you should meet. Can you be at Riverside Airport tomorrow, 2 p.m., Terminal C?" "Why?" "Because the man whose life you saved wants to introduce you to the woman who's going to change yours." Kara showed up at 1:45 p.m., her stomach twisted in knots. Marcus was waiting at the exact spot where she'd performed CPR, standing with a woman in her early 50s who radiated the kind of authority that made generals stand straighter. "Kara Mitchell," Marcus said. "This is Commander Lisa Graves. She runs the Civilian Medical Response Initiative, a program that coordinates emergency healthcare providers with military and crisis response teams." Commander Graves extended her hand. Her grip was firm, assessing. "Chief Reed has told me about your background. 12 years nursing, 8 in emergency medicine, flawless record until you had the audacity to save a life outside normal business hours." Kara managed a weak smile. "That about sums it up. Walk with me." It wasn't a request. They moved through the terminal while Graves talked. "CMRI is expanding. We need experienced emergency nurses who can work in high-pressure environments, make critical decisions without oversight, and actually give a damn about saving lives over covering asses. The work involves disaster response, medical evacuation support, and training civilian providers in trauma care. It's harder than hospital nursing, more dangerous, better pay, better respect, and zero tolerance for bureaucratic nonsense." Kara's heart was pounding. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a choice. You can go back to Cedar Valley, accept their desperate attempt to save face, and spend the next decade fighting the same battles. Or you can walk away from a broken system and do something that actually matters." Graves stopped, turning to face her directly. "I read your file. You're exactly the kind of nurse we need. Someone who sees a crisis and runs toward it instead of checking policy manuals." "I have a daughter. I can't take some dangerous job." "The position comes with full benefits, housing stipend, education fund for dependents, and a signing bonus that would cover 6 months of expenses. You'd work rotating deployments, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, which means you'd actually be home more than you are now." Graves pulled out a folder. Full job description, salary information, contact details. "Think about it. But not too long. We need people like you, and frankly, watching Cedar Valley try to buy your silence is making me sick." She walked away, leaving Kara standing in the middle of the terminal with a folder that felt like a bomb in her hands. Marcus appeared at her shoulder. "She doesn't make offers like that to just anyone. This is insane. I don't know anything about military medicine or disaster response, or you performed perfect CPR on a concrete floor with no equipment and brought a dead man back to life. You're exactly who they need." He touched her arm gently. "Kara, you can't save a system that doesn't want to be saved, but you can save yourself and your daughter." That night, Kara sat at her kitchen table with the CMRI offer on one side and Cedar Valley's reinstatement email on the other. Two paths, two futures. Safe or brave. Familiar or unknown. Survival or something bigger. Mia wandered out in her pajamas, saw the papers, and climbed into Kara's lap without asking. "What are those?" "Decisions." "What kind?" Kara wrapped her arms around her daughter, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "The kind that changes everything." "Is change bad?" "Sometimes. Sometimes it's the only thing that saves you." Mia was quiet for a moment, then, "You saved that soldier. Maybe someone needs to save you too." Out of the mouths of 10-year-olds came the truth Kara had been avoiding. She'd been so busy keeping her head down, surviving, enduring, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to actually choose her own path. She picked up her phone and called Daniel Ortega. "I need you to draft a response to Cedar Valley's offer. Accepting or declining?" Kara looked at the CMRI folder, thought about Commander Graves's words, about Marcus risking everything to fly across the country and say thank you, about 9 nurses who'd walked away from security because they remembered what nursing was supposed to be. "Declining. And I need you to include something specific." The next morning, Cedar Valley Regional's CEO received a formal letter from Kara's attorney. It was professional, measured, and devastating. "Ms. Mitchell appreciates the hospital's offer, but respectfully declines reinstatement. She has accepted a position with the Civilian Medical Response Initiative where her skills will be valued rather than penalized. However, she requests that Cedar Valley implement the following policy changes in her name: mandatory safe staffing ratios, protection for nurses who report safety concerns, and immunity for emergency medical care provided by off-duty staff. She hopes that future nurses will not be punished for choosing compassion over protocol." The letter went public at noon. By evening, it had been shared 50,000 times. Nurses across the country were printing it out, posting it in break rooms, sending it to hospital administrators with one line added, "This is what accountability looks like." Cedar Valley's board went into emergency session. The CEO was asked to resign. Director Hastings was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Sylvia Brennan, who'd been quietly feeding information to Hastings about staff troublemakers, found herself suddenly isolated as nurses she'd bullied for years refused to work shifts with her. The system was eating itself, and Kara Mitchell, the nurse they'd tried to silence, was walking away from all of it with her head held high. But the story wasn't over. Because across town, in a hospital administrator's office, someone was making a phone call that would turn everything sideways. "We need to contain this before it spreads. I don't care what it costs. Find something on Mitchell, anything we can use. Credibility issues, patient complaints, personal problems. She's making us look incompetent, and it stops now." The voice on the other end was cold, professional. "Understood. How deep do you want me to dig?" "All the way to the bottom, and if you don't find anything, create something we can work with. This nurse destroyed our reputation. Time to return the favor." The hit piece dropped at 6:15 a.m. on a Wednesday, timed perfectly to catch the morning news cycle before anyone could mount a defense. Kara was making Mia breakfast when her phone started vibrating like a seizure victim. Texts, calls, notifications cascading so fast the screen couldn't keep up. She grabbed it with wet hands, saw Daniel Ortega's name, and her stomach turned to ice. "Don't read it yet," he said the second she answered. "I'm sending you something first. Legal strategy. Read mine before you look at theirs." "Before I look at what?" "The Cedar Valley counterattack. They leaked your personnel file to the press. selectively edited to make you look incompetent and unstable. The kitchen tilted. That's confidential. That's illegal. It's also done. It's already on 3 major news sites and spreading. Someone at the hospital decided if they were going down, they'd drag you with them. Kara's hands went numb. Mia was watching her, cereal spoon frozen halfway to her mouth, reading her mother's face the way children learn to read disaster. I need to see it, Kara said. Kara, now. Daniel sent the link. Kara opened it and felt the world drop away. The headline, Hero Nurse or Reckless Liability? Cedar Valley releases troubling performance records. Below it, a carefully constructed narrative built from fragments of truth twisted into weapons. A medication error from 6 years ago, caught and corrected before it reached the patient, used as an example during a hospital-wide safety training, now presented as evidence of incompetence. A written warning from 3 years back for insubordination when she'd refused to discharge a patient she knew was having a stroke, overruling a doctor who turned out to be wrong, now framed as inability to follow medical authority. Patient complaints cherry-picked from hundreds of interactions. One family upset she wouldn't give their drug-seeking relative narcotics. Another angry she'd prioritized a coding patient over their non-urgent concern, now weaponized as proof of poor bedside manner. And worst of all, buried in the middle like a poison pill, a mention of her ex-husband. The custody battle. The implication, never stated directly, legally deniable, that someone who couldn't keep her own family together might not be stable enough to make life or death medical decisions. Kara read it twice, her vision tunneling, her breath coming in shallow gasps that felt like drowning on dry land. Mom? Mia's voice, small and scared. Mom, what's wrong? Kara couldn't answer. She was staring at her daughter, her brilliant, patient, beautiful daughter who'd already lost her father to his own demons, and watching the realization dawn that now she'd lose her mother too, not to death but to public destruction. I have to go to school, Mia whispered, backing away from the table like Kara had become radioactive. Baby, wait! But Mia was already grabbing her backpack, already fleeing to the one place that felt safer than home, and Kara let her go because what could she say? That it would be okay? That was a lie. That the truth would come out? The truth was already buried under manufactured scandal. The phone rang again. Marcus this time, his voice tight with rage. I'm looking at it right now. This is character assassination. It's working. Kara's voice sounded dead even to herself. The comments are already turning. People who called me a hero yesterday are calling me reckless today, saying they always knew something was off, saying Cedar Valley was right to suspend me. Public opinion is fickle. We knew that going in. No. Kara stood, pacing her kitchen like a caged animal. You don't understand. I have a 10-year-old daughter who just watched her mother get publicly destroyed. I have a new job that requires security clearance. What happens when CMRI does a background check and finds this? Her voice broke. She pressed her fist against her mouth, fighting for control. Marcus was quiet for 3 seconds that felt like hours. Then, are you giving up? I'm being realistic. Reality is that Cedar Valley just committed multiple felonies by leaking your confidential personnel file. Reality is that every single thing in that article can be debunked. Reality is that you have resources now. Me, Commander Graves, 9 nurses who walked away from their jobs for you, a lawyer who's salivating at the chance to destroy these people in court. His voice dropped, granite hard. But none of that matters if you quit. So I'm asking again, are you giving up? Kara looked around her apartment, the bills on the counter, the science fair ribbon on the fridge, the life she'd built from nothing after her marriage collapsed, and she'd had to remake herself into someone who could survive alone. She'd fought so hard for so long, and she was tired. Bone-deep, soul-crushing tired. But Mia's voice echoed in her head. You saved that soldier. Maybe someone needs to save you too. No, Kara said. I'm not giving up. I'm getting angry. She heard Marcus smile through the phone. Good, because I just sent Cedar Valley's legal team something they're going to hate. A formal notice that we're suing for defamation, violation of privacy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. And I attached the contact information for every major news outlet that's been covering this story. You can't prove they leaked it. I can prove they benefited from it. I can prove it came from inside their system. And I can make their lives miserable enough that they'll settle just to make it stop. Daniel's already drafting the lawsuit. We file by end of business today. Kara closed her eyes. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Everything worth doing does. He hung up. Kara stood in her kitchen, surrounded by the debris of her carefully managed life, and made herself a promise. If Cedar Valley wanted war, she'd give them one. But she'd fight smart, not emotional, strategic, not reactive. She called Daniel back. What do you need from me? Documentation. Every shift you worked, every patient you saved, every time you went above and beyond. I want proof that you're not just competent, you're exceptional. Character witnesses, colleagues who will testify to your skill, patient outcomes, anything that counters their narrative. Most of my colleagues still work there. They can't risk, let me worry about that. You focus on getting me evidence. Kara spent the next 4 hours digging through old emails, shift reports, performance reviews that actually reflected her work before Hastings started managing her out. She found commendations from doctors, thank you notes from patients' families, data showing her complication rates were consistently below department average. She found the email chain where she'd caught a pharmacy error that would have killed 3 patients, the incident report where she'd identified sepsis before the labs came back, the shift log showing she'd personally trained 8 new nurses while working double coverage. She built a counter-narrative, piece by piece, email by email, until her laptop screen blurred from staring too long. Around noon, Jenny Cortez showed up with coffee and a laptop of her own. I'm helping whether you want me to or not, she announced, setting up at Kara's kitchen table. I've got access to the old hospital shared drive. Before Hastings locked everything down, we used to keep running records of good saves, close calls, teaching moments. If your documentation is in there, I can find it. Jenny, if they catch you accessing hospital files, I already quit. What are they going to do, fire me harder? She was already typing, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Besides, I'm not the only one. Sarah's pulling medical board certification records proving you've maintained every credential and advanced cert while the hospital cut training budgets. Michael's getting patient satisfaction surveys from before Hastings started manipulating the metrics. We're building you a defense whether Cedar Valley likes it or not. By 3 p.m., they had a file 3 inches thick of documentation proving Kara Mitchell was exactly what she'd always claimed to be. An exceptional nurse who'd been ground down by a broken system. Daniel reviewed everything, made notes, asked pointed questions. This is good. This is really good. But we need something bigger. Something that proves Cedar Valley has a pattern of behavior, not just a vendetta against you. Like what? Like proof they've done this before, retaliated against other nurses, falsified records, created hostile work environments. He looked at Jenny. You said 9 nurses quit. How many left in the past 2 years total? Jenny pulled up a spreadsheet. 47. In a department of 80. That's insane turnover. And how many of those exits were officially classified as resignations versus terminations? Almost all resignations. But that doesn't mean they were voluntary. Hospital policy is to offer resignation in lieu of termination to avoid unemployment claims. Makes the numbers look better. Daniel's eyes went sharp. I need to talk to those nurses. As many as will talk to me. If we can establish a pattern. His phone rang. He glanced at it, frowned, and answered. Daniel Ortega. His expression shifted from confusion to shock to something that looked like vindication. Are you certain? And you're willing to testify? A long pause. Yes. Yes, absolutely. I'll be there in 30 minutes. He hung up and looked at Kara with an expression she couldn't read. That was Dr. Patricia Weston, cardiologist at Cedar Valley. She says she has information about Director Hastings that will change everything. She wants to meet. Now. They met at a coffee shop 3 miles from the hospital, chosen specifically because no Cedar Valley staff would be caught dead there. Dr. Weston was in her late 60s, steel gray hair pulled back in a bun, the kind of doctor who'd been practicing since before medicine became corporate. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. I'm retiring in 6 months, she said, sliding a manila folder across the table. So I have nothing left to lose. What's in this folder is proof that Rachel Hastings has been systematically manipulating patient care metrics, falsifying staffing reports to regulators, and retaliating against medical staff who questioned her directives. Kara opened the folder. Inside were emails, memos, policy changes, all bearing Hastings' signature or direct approval. One email chain showed Hastings ordering charge nurses to modify patient satisfaction surveys, removing negative responses before submitting to the board. Another showed her instructing HR to classify safety complaints as interpersonal conflicts to avoid triggering mandatory reviews. A third showed her threatening a doctor who'd reported unsafe nurse-to-patient ratios to the state health department. "Why now?" Daniel asked. "If you've had this, why wait?" "Because I'm a coward," Dr. Weston said bluntly. "I told myself it wasn't my fight, that I could just keep my head down until retirement. Then I watched what they did to Nurse Mitchell, and I realized I'm complicit. I've been complicit for 2 years while good people were driven out, and patient care deteriorated." She looked directly at Kara. "You saved a man's life, and they tried to destroy you for it. I can't fix what I didn't stop, but I can make sure it doesn't continue." Kara felt something crack open in her chest. Not hope exactly, but something close. Validation. Proof that she wasn't crazy, that the system really was broken, that people who should have been protecting patients were protecting profits instead. "This is enough for a lawsuit," Daniel said, already photographing pages with his phone. "This is enough for a state investigation. This might be enough for federal charges if we can prove Medicare fraud." "There's more." Dr. Weston pulled out another folder. Staffing records showing Cedar Valley has been billing for nurse coverage they didn't provide. They've been short staffing shifts, pocketing the money, and falsifying documentation. Patients have died from preventable complications because there weren't enough nurses on the floor. The room went silent. This wasn't about one nurse anymore. This was about systemic negligence. This was about patients who'd trusted the hospital and been betrayed for profit. "How many?" Kara whispered. Dr. Weston's hands were shaking. 7 that I can prove. All within the past 18 months. All in units that were chronically understaffed. All classified as unavoidable complications when they were anything but. Kara thought about the shifts she'd worked, running between 16 patients when policy said 8 maximum. Thought about the codes she'd responded to alone because there was no backup. Thought about the near misses she'd caught by sheer luck and exhaustion-fueled hypervigilance. She could have been one of those 7. Daniel was already on his phone calling someone. "I need you to conference in the State Attorney General's office." "Yes, now." "No, this can't wait." What happened next moved with the brutal efficiency of a military operation. Daniel connected with a prosecutor friend who'd been looking for exactly this kind of case. Dr. Weston agreed to be a whistleblower, accepting the risks in exchange for immunity. The state launched an emergency investigation into Cedar Valley Regional, sending inspectors that same afternoon. By 6 p.m., the story had shifted. National news picked up the expanded scandal. Nurse suspension reveals hospital fraud, patient deaths. The hospital went into lockdown. Administrators hired crisis management firms. The board called emergency meetings behind closed doors. And Director Hastings, the woman who'd suspended Kara, who'd leaked her personnel file, who'd built an empire on broken protocols, was escorted from the building by state investigators carrying boxes of evidence. Kara watched it happen live on the news, sitting on her couch with Mia tucked against her side. Her daughter had come home from school quiet and withdrawn, but when she saw Hastings being led out of the hospital, she'd looked up at Kara with something like awe. "You did that?" "Dr. Weston did that, and the investigators. And Daniel, you started it," Mia said firmly. "You saved someone and they tried to crush you and you didn't let them." Kara pulled her daughter closer, breathing in her strawberry shampoo, feeling something shift in the universe. Not justice yet, that would take time, but the beginning of accountability. Her phone rang. "Marcus, you watching this?" "Front row seat." "Commander Graves wants to move your start date up. Full training begins next week. You ready?" Kara looked around her apartment, at the bills she'd been terrified of, at the life she'd built from scraps and determination, at the daughter who was learning that sometimes fighting back was the only option. "Yeah," she said, "I'm ready." But Cedar Valley wasn't finished. Cornered animals fight dirtiest, and the hospital's remaining leadership knew they were facing institutional destruction. If they were going down, they'd take everyone with them. At 9 p.m. that night, a news story leaked. Suspended nurse under investigation for controlled substance discrepancies. The article claimed that during the review of Kara's personnel file, auditors had discovered irregularities in her medication documentation. Narcotics signed out but not properly accounted for, enough to trigger a formal investigation by the state nursing board. It was a lie. A complete calculated fabrication designed to destroy her nursing license and credibility simultaneously. But it was a lie that worked. Within hours, CMRI's background check flagged the investigation. Commander Graves called personally. "I need you to tell me this isn't true." "It's not. They're manufacturing evidence because they know I'm about to destroy them in court." "Can you prove that?" Kara's throat closed. "Not immediately. The investigation is real now, even if the allegations are false. State board has to follow protocol." Silence. Then, "I'm sorry, Kara. Until this is resolved, I can't move forward with your employment. Security clearance requires clean background. If you're cleared, the job is still yours. But until then..." "I understand." She hung up and sat in the dark, staring at nothing. They'd taken her old job, destroyed her reputation, and now they'd killed her new future before it could start. Daniel called 30 seconds later, his voice tight with fury. "I just saw it. This is beyond defamation. This is criminal fraud. We're filing an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow morning." "It won't matter. The damage is done. CMRI pulled their offer." "Temporarily. Once we prove this is fabricated, once we prove it, how long will that take? Weeks? Months? Meanwhile, I have no income, no prospects, and a daughter who needs to eat." "Karashe, I'm tired, Daniel. I'm so tired of fighting." She hung up on him too, something she'd never done to anyone, and sat in the silence of her apartment wondering if there was a point where doing the right thing stopped being noble and started being stupid. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Don't you dare quit now." Another from Jenny. "We're not backing down, neither are you." Another from Dr. Weston. "I have the real medication logs. They won't get away with this." And one from a number she didn't recognize. "My husband is alive because of you. Whatever you need, whatever it takes. Jennifer Reed." Kara read them all, these messages from people who barely knew her but were willing to fight on her behalf, and felt something harden in her chest that felt like resolve wrapped in rage. She'd been playing defense this whole time, reacting, surviving, letting Cedar Valley set the terms of engagement. Time to change tactics. She called Daniel back. "I want to go public, not through lawyers or statements. I want to do a live interview, national news, tell my side before they can spin it." "That's risky. Anything you say can be used." "They've already decided I'm guilty. I've got nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Set it up." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." The interview was scheduled for the following evening. Prime time, national audience, no editorial control. Just Kara, a journalist known for tough questions, and the truth. Cedar Valley's legal team tried to block it, claimed it would prejudice their case, threatened lawsuits. The network's lawyers laughed them out of the building. This was news, and Kara had agreed voluntarily. The day of the interview, Kara dressed carefully. Not in scrubs. She wasn't trying to play the nurse card. Not in expensive clothes she didn't own. Just clean jeans, a simple shirt, and the face of a woman who'd stopped apologizing for saving lives. Mia hugged her before she left. "You're going to be great." "How do you know?" "Because you're my mom, and you're the bravest person I know." Kara held her daughter tight, breathing strength from someone half her size, and walked out to face the cameras. The studio was smaller than she expected, but the lights were blinding, and the journalist, Catherine Park, veteran interviewer who'd made senators sweat, was sharp-eyed and ready. They went live at 8 p.m. Eastern. "Ms. Mitchell, Cedar Valley Regional has released documentation suggesting you have a history of performance issues and may have engaged in controlled substance diversion. How do you respond?" Kara looked directly into the camera. "Those allegations are false. Completely, provably false. And I can demonstrate why they're false, how they were fabricated, and who ordered it done." She'd rehearsed this with Daniel a dozen times. Stay calm. Stick to facts. Don't let emotion override message. But when Catherine asked about the airport rescue, something in Kara shifted. I didn't save Chief Petty Officer Reed's life because I'm a hero. I saved him because I'm a nurse, and that's what nurses do. We see someone dying and we can't walk away. It's not optional. It's not heroic. It's who we are. Her voice strengthened. What's happening now isn't about me. It's about a healthcare system that punishes compassion and protects profit. It's about hospitals that would rather destroy a nurse than admit their policies kill patients. It's about people like Director Hastings who've turned medicine into a liability shield and broken everyone caught inside it. Catherine leaned forward. Those are serious allegations. They're documented facts. I have emails, memos, staffing records, and testimony from hospital staff proving Cedar Valley has been systematically endangering patients while falsifying regulatory reports. 7 patients have died from understaffing in the past 18 months. The state is investigating. The evidence is real, and they're trying to discredit me before that evidence destroys them. The interview ran 45 minutes. By the time it ended, social media was exploding. #ProtectNurses was trending nationally, and Cedar Valley Regional's phone system had crashed again from call volume. Kara walked out of the studio feeling like she'd just run a marathon, her hands shaking with adrenaline crash, and found Marcus waiting in the parking lot. "You just declared war on an entire hospital system," he said. "I know. They're going to come at you with everything they have. I know that too." He studied her for a long moment, then smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "Good, because I've been making some calls of my own. Turns out when you save a Navy SEAL's life, his entire command structure takes an interest. And when they take an interest, things happen." "What kind of things?" "The kind where the Department of Defense starts asking questions about why a hospital that holds federal contracts is retaliating against someone who provided emergency medical care to active duty personnel. The kind where senators get involved because their constituents are pissed. The kind where Cedar Valley just became a political liability nobody wants to touch." Kara stared at him. "You weaponized the military." "I weaponized gratitude. There's a difference." He handed her his phone. "You should see this." On the screen was an email from Commander Graves. Investigation fast-tracked. Allegations proven false. Medication logs were backdated forgeries. Job offer reinstated effective immediately. Welcome to CMRI. Kara read it 3 times, her vision blurring. "They cleared me already?" Dr. Weston provided the original logs. State Board compared timestamps and metadata. Someone at Cedar Valley got sloppy in their rush to frame you. The forgeries are obvious once you know to look. Everything Kara had been holding together for days finally broke. She sat down hard on the parking lot curb and sobbed. Great, gasping, ugly cries that came from somewhere deeper than relief. Marcus sat beside her, patient and silent, until she could breathe again. "They tried to destroy me," she whispered. "They failed. You won." But even as he said it, Kara knew the truth was more complicated. She'd survived. She'd fought back. She'd exposed corruption that needed exposing. But the cost had been brutal. And somewhere in Cedar Valley Regional, other nurses were still trapped in the same broken system, still afraid to speak up, still being ground down by policies that valued profit over people. Her phone buzzed. "Daniel. The State Attorney General just announced a formal investigation into Cedar Valley Regional for Medicaid fraud, patient endangerment, and obstruction of justice. Hastings is facing criminal charges. The CEO resigned an hour ago. The board is negotiating a settlement that includes mandatory policy reforms and independent oversight." Kara closed her eyes. "What about the other nurses? The ones who got forced out?" "Working on it. We're building a class action. Everyone who was retaliated against, everyone who was pressured to resign, everyone who lost their career because they cared too much. We're going to make Cedar Valley pay for all of it." She hung up and looked at Marcus. "It's not over." "No. But you're not fighting alone anymore." They sat there as the sun set, a nurse who'd saved a stranger and a soldier who refused to let that kindness be punished, and watched the first cracks appear in a system that had seemed unbreakable just days before. Across town, in an empty administrator's office, someone was shredding documents as fast as the machine would take them, knowing it was already too late but trying anyway. In a boardroom, lawyers were calculating settlement numbers that would bankrupt reputations, if not budgets. And in hospital break rooms across the country, nurses were watching Kara's interview and asking themselves if maybe, finally, someone had found the courage to fight back. The machinery of justice was slow, but once it started moving, it was relentless. And Kara Mitchell, the nurse who'd been suspended for saving a life, had just become the wrecking ball that would tear down everything corrupt about Cedar Valley Regional Medical Center. But in a conference room 3 floors below ground level, where the real power brokers met when they needed deniability, one final decision was being made. A decision that would either end this quietly or turn it into something that would consume them all. "We settle," the acting CEO said. "Whatever it takes. We make her go away." The chief legal counsel shook his head slowly, reviewing the latest poll numbers showing 92% public support for Kara. "Settling now looks like admission of guilt. We fight this. We have a chance to what? Win in court? While losing in public opinion? While federal investigators crawl through our books? While every news outlet in the country makes us the symbol of everything wrong with healthcare?" He slammed his hand on the table. "No, we offer her whatever she wants. Money, apology, policy changes, I don't care. We end this before it metastasizes." "And if she refuses?" The silence that followed was answer enough, because everyone in that room knew that Kara Mitchell wasn't fighting for money or apologies anymore. She was fighting for something bigger. And people fighting for principles don't settle. They burn it all down. They sent the settlement offer at 9:42 a.m. the next morning, delivered by courier to Daniel's office like they were serving a subpoena in reverse. Daniel called Kara before he'd finished reading the second page. "You need to see this in person." She arrived 30 minutes later, Mia in tow because school was on spring break, and Mrs. Chen had the flu. Her daughter sat in the waiting room with headphones and homework while Kara followed Daniel into his conference room, where he'd spread the hospital's offer across the table like evidence at a crime scene. "They're offering $750,000, Daniel said without preamble. "Full reinstatement with back pay, formal public apology, guaranteed promotion to clinical director with a seat on the hospital safety committee, and a legally binding commitment to implement the staffing reforms you requested." Kara stared at the number. $750,000. Enough to pay off every debt, buy a house, secure Mia's college fund, never worry about money again. "There's a catch," she said. "There's always a catch." Daniel flipped to page 7. "You sign a non-disclosure agreement. You can't discuss the case publicly, can't give interviews, can't write about it, can't consult on similar cases. You take the money and the reforms, and you disappear from the narrative completely." Kara sat down heavily. "They want to buy my silence. They want to buy their reputation back. The reforms are real. I had our healthcare policy expert review them. Safe staffing ratios, whistleblower protections, independent safety oversight, everything you asked for. They'll implement it, and you'll have enforcement authority as clinical director. But I can't talk about how we got here, can't tell other nurses how to fight back, can't be part of the larger conversation about healthcare reform." "Correct." Kara looked at the settlement agreement, at the dollar amount that could change her life, at the reforms that could save future patients. This was what winning looked like in the real world. Messy and compromised and far from perfect. "How long do I have to decide?" "They want an answer by end of business today. They're desperate to close this before the federal investigators finish their audit." "What do you think I should do?" Daniel removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "I think you should take the money. I think you fought hard enough, sacrificed enough, and you deserve security for you and your daughter. The reforms are real. You'll save lives by implementing them." He paused. "But I also think if you walk away now, Cedar Valley gets to control the story. They'll say you were a disgruntled employee who got bought off, and every hospital administrator in the country will learn that the price of silencing a nurse is $750,000. Kara stood and walked to the window, looking down at the street 12 floors below. People moving through their lives, unaware that in conference rooms like this, decisions were being made that would determine whether healthcare stayed broken or started healing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Jennifer wants to talk to you. Can you call her?" Kara stepped into the hallway and dialed the number Marcus had sent. Jennifer Reed answered on the first ring. "Miss Mitchell, thank you for calling. Please call me Kara." "Kara." Jennifer's voice was warm but firm. carrying the steel of a military spouse who'd learned to fight battles on the home front. Marcus told me about the settlement offer. I need you to know something before you decide. Kara waited. After you saved my husband, I did research on cardiac arrest survival rates, on bystander intervention, on how many people die because nobody helps. Do you know what I found? That most people don't make it. That 90% don't make it. That Marcus should be dead. That he's only alive because you refused to be one of the people who stood there filming. Jennifer's voice cracked slightly. My daughters still have their father. I still have my husband. And if you take that settlement and disappear, the next nurse in the next hospital won't know it's possible to fight back. They'll let the system grind them down. And the next soldier, the next person who collapses in public, might not get lucky enough to have someone like you nearby. Kara's eyes burned. It's a lot of money. It's blood money. It's what they're paying to make you complicit in keeping the system broken. Jennifer took a breath. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. You've already given more than anyone should have to give, but I needed you to know that your fight matters beyond just you. It matters to every family like mine who's going to need someone brave enough to break the rules and save a life. They talked for another 10 minutes, about Jennifer's daughters, about Mia, about the weight of doing the right thing when the cost is brutal. When they hung up, Kara stood in the hallway feeling like she'd been cracked open and reassembled into someone slightly different. She walked back into Daniel's office. Mia had abandoned her homework and was reading the settlement agreement, her young face serious. That's a lot of money, Mia said quietly. It is. Would we have to move? Change schools? Probably not. But we'd be comfortable, secure, no more worrying about bills. Mia set down the paper and looked at her mother with eyes that seemed older than 10. Would you have to stop being you? The question landed like a physical blow. What do you mean? The mom who runs toward emergencies instead of away, who fights even when it's scary, who taught me that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. Mia's voice was steady. If you take this, would you have to stop being that person? Kara knelt in front of her daughter, taking her small hands. I don't know, baby. Maybe I could do more good from inside the system, implementing the reforms, protecting other nurses, making sure patients are safe. Or maybe they'd find ways to control you, make you quiet, turn you into someone who follows rules instead of saves lives. Mia squeezed Kara's hands. I'm scared of being poor, but I'm more scared of you becoming someone I don't recognize. Out of the mouths of children came the truth adults spent lifetimes avoiding. Kara stood and turned to Daniel. I'm rejecting the offer. He nodded slowly, unsurprised. You're sure? No, but I'm certain there's a difference. They won't make another offer. This is walk-away money. You turn it down, we go to trial. Full public proceeding. Every dirty secret exposed. And trials are unpredictable. You could win nothing. Or I could win something that actually matters. Precedent, accountability. A message to every hospital that you can't destroy nurses for caring. Kara's voice was steady. Draft the rejection. Make it clear why I'm declining. I want them to know this isn't about money. It's about principle. Daniel drafted the response while Kara waited, each word a nail in Cedar Valley's coffin. She signed it without hesitation, and Daniel sent it via email with read receipt requested. The hospital's response came within 90 minutes. Not from lawyers. From the new acting CEO directly, a man named Robert Halloway, who'd been brought in to manage the crisis and salvage what remained of Cedar Valley's reputation. He requested a face-to-face meeting, just Kara and him. No lawyers, no mediators, off the record. It's a trap, Marcus said when she told him. Maybe, or maybe he wants to actually talk. You don't owe him conversation. No, but I want to look him in the eye when I tell him exactly what his hospital did to me and every other nurse they've destroyed. They met at a coffee shop equidistant from both their locations, neutral territory with witnesses. Halloway was 63, silver-haired, and carried himself with the weariness of someone who'd spent a career cleaning up other people's messes. He ordered coffee and got straight to it. Ms. Mitchell, I'm not here to change your mind about the settlement. I respect your decision, even though I think it's financially insane. He sipped his coffee. I'm here because I need you to understand what happens next. You threaten me? No, I explain reality. He pulled out a folder. This hospital is dying. Physician recruitment is down 60%. Patient transfers to other facilities are up 40%. Our bond rating was just downgraded. Major donors are withdrawing support. Within 6 months, Cedar Valley Regional will either close or be acquired by a larger health system. Kara felt no satisfaction, only a cold certainty. That's on you and Hastings and everyone who chose profit over patients. Agreed. But when we close, 3,000 people lose their jobs. The county loses its only Level 2 trauma center. Rural communities lose access to emergency care within 50 miles. He leaned forward. I'm not asking you to care about the administrators, but the cooks, the janitors, the nurses who didn't quit, the patients who need us. They're collateral damage in a fight they didn't start. You're trying to make me feel guilty for defending myself. I'm trying to make you see the bigger picture. You won. Hastings is facing criminal charges. The board is gutted. Reforms are being implemented whether you're here or not. But pushing this to trial, making it a public circus, that doesn't hurt the people who wronged you. They're already gone. It hurts everyone else. Kara set down her coffee carefully. You know what I see when I look at the bigger picture? 7 patients who died because your hospital understaffed units to save money. 47 nurses who were driven out for caring too much. Thousands of patients who received substandard care because policy mattered more than people. Her voice was ice. Cedar Valley Regional deserves to close. And if that's collateral damage, then maybe the system needs to learn that consequences are real. Holloway studied her for a long moment. You really believe that? I know that, because I lived it. He nodded slowly, then stood. I had to try. For the record, you would have been an excellent clinical director. The hospital needs people like you. The hospital needs to not exist in its current form. Maybe something better rises from the ashes. Maybe. He dropped a 20 on the table for the coffee. Or maybe 3,000 people just end up unemployed and a county loses critical healthcare access. I guess we'll see. He walked out, leaving Kara alone with the weight of consequences she hadn't asked for but couldn't avoid. She sat there for 20 minutes, staring at nothing, before her phone rang. Daniel. The state attorney general wants to meet. They're offering you a deal. What kind of deal? Testify against Hastings and the former CEO. Help them build the criminal case. In exchange, they fast-track the reforms and guarantee independent oversight to prevent future abuses. That's not a deal. That's what I want anyway. The deal is that they'll also fund a nursing advocacy position at the AG's office. Someone who reviews hospital complaints, investigates retaliation claims, and has authority to trigger regulatory action. They want to offer you the job. Kara's breath caught. A government position investigating hospital abuse, with subpoena power, protected status, and a salary that would let you keep fighting without worrying about money. You'd be turning your experience into systematic change. It was perfect. Too perfect. What's the catch? You'd have to work with hospitals, not against them. Build consensus, create policies, negotiate reforms. You'd be inside the system trying to fix it, not outside burning it down. Kara thought about what Holloway had said, about collateral damage and bigger pictures. Thought about Jennifer Reed's words about the next nurse who'd need to know fighting back was possible. Thought about Mia's question about whether she'd have to stop being herself. Set up the meeting, she said. I want to hear what they're proposing. The meeting was the next day, in the state capitol, in an office that overlooked the city where laws were written and justice was theoretically dispensed. The Attorney General was a sharp-eyed woman named Victoria Reese, who'd built her career on white-collar prosecutions. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. We have Hastings dead to rights on multiple felonies: Medicare fraud, falsification of medical records, obstruction of justice. She's looking at 15 to 20 years if convicted, but we need insider testimony to make the case airtight. Someone who can explain to a jury how the policies translated to patient harm. I can do that, Kara said. I know you can. The question is whether you want the job that comes after. Reese laid out the proposal. The nursing advocacy and oversight position would be new, created specifically in response to the Cedar Valley scandal. It would have authority to investigate complaints from nurses across the state, review hospital policies for safety compliance, and recommend regulatory action to the health department. The salary was $68,000. Not wealthy, but stable. Benefits were government standard. Term was 4 years, renewable. Why me? Kara asked. I'm not a lawyer or policy expert. You're a nurse who understands the system from inside, who has credibility with frontline staff, who proved you can't be intimidated or bought. Reese's expression was unreadable. The healthcare lobby is going to fight this position hard. I need someone who won't fold when they start applying pressure. Someone who's already survived their worst. Kara thought about it. Working inside the system, building bridges instead of burning them, creating sustainable change instead of symbolic victories. It felt like compromise. It felt like selling out. It also felt like the only way to actually fix anything. I need 3 guarantees, Kara said. 1, the position has real authority, not advisory, not consultative. Power to trigger investigations and recommend sanctions. 2, I answer to the AG's office, not the health department. No hospital industry captured oversight. 3, the reforms at Cedar Valley happen regardless of whether I take this job. They're not contingent on my cooperation. Reese smiled. Already written into the enabling legislation. The governor's signing it tomorrow. Then I accept. They shook hands. Kara walked out of the state capitol building feeling like she'd just made either the best or worst decision of her life, and there was no way to know which until time revealed it. Marcus was waiting at the bottom of the steps, leaning against a concrete pillar like he'd been carved from the same stone. You took the job. How did you know? Because you walked out looking determined instead of relieved. Money makes people relieved. Purpose makes them determined. They walked through the Capitol grounds while Kara explained the position, the authority, the mission. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. So you're going to work with hospitals instead of destroying them, he said finally. I'm going to make them better, or at least less terrible. That's going to piss off people who wanted blood. People who wanted blood can file their own lawsuits. I wanted change. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. For what it's worth, I think you made the right call. Burning everything down feels good, but building something better matters more. Tell me that in 6 months when I'm buried in bureaucracy and the hospitals are fighting every reform. I'll tell you that every day if you need to hear it. His expression was serious. You saved my life, Kara. Now you're going to save a lot of other lives by making sure nurses can do their jobs without getting destroyed for it. That's not compromise. That's victory. The trial started 6 weeks later, and it was everything the hospital had feared. The prosecution built their case methodically. Falsified staffing reports, manipulated patient safety metrics, Medicare billing fraud amounting to $3.7 million over 2 years. They called Dr. Weston, who testified about pressure to overlook safety violations. They called former nurses who described impossible working conditions and retaliation for speaking up. They called family members of patients who died from preventable complications. And then they called Kara. She sat in the witness box in a navy suit Daniel had helped her pick out, looking directly at Rachel Hastings sitting at the defense table. The woman who'd suspended her, leaked her personnel file, tried to destroy her career to protect her own. Hastings wouldn't meet her eyes. The prosecutor, a methodical man named Stevens, walked Kara through her employment history, her exemplary record, the day she saved Marcus Reed's life. Then he asked the question that mattered. Ms. Mitchell, in your professional opinion, did the policies implemented by Director Hastings create conditions that endangered patient safety? Yes. Can you explain why? Kara took a breath and delivered testimony she'd been preparing for weeks. She explained safe nurse-to-patient ratios and how Cedar Valley consistently violated them. She described the pressure to discharge patients prematurely to maintain bed turnover. She detailed incidents where she'd caught critical errors because she stayed late despite being forbidden overtime. I watched patients suffer complications that were preventable with proper staffing. I watched nurses break down crying in supply closets because they couldn't provide adequate care. I watched the hospital prioritize profit metrics over human lives, systematically and deliberately, for years. And when you raised concerns, I was labeled difficult, insubordinate, a troublemaker. Kara's voice was steady. The hospital's message was clear. Stay quiet or lose your job. Most nurses stayed quiet. The ones who didn't were driven out. The defense tried to rattle her on cross-examination, suggesting she was bitter about the suspension, that she was exaggerating to justify a lawsuit, that she couldn't prove direct causation between policies and patient deaths. Kara answered each question calmly, precisely, letting the facts speak. The defense attorney, a man who charged $800 an hour to protect people like Hastings, tried one final angle. Ms. Mitchell, you've accepted a position with the Attorney General's office investigating hospital practices. Isn't it true you're testifying here to advance your own career? Kara looked at him with something that might have been pity. I'm testifying here because 7 patients died, because nurses were punished for caring, because a system that's supposed to heal people became a machine that grinds them up for profit. If that advances my career, then I guess caring about patients is suddenly good for business. The gallery erupted in applause. The judge gavelled for order, but she was smiling. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Rachel Hastings stood emotionless as the verdict was read, her hands clasped in front of her, her expensive suit perfectly pressed. She'd probably known this was coming for weeks. But knowing and experiencing are different things. At sentencing 2 months later, the judge gave her 12 years in federal prison and ordered restitution of the full $3.7 million. The former CEO got 8 years. 3 board members were hit with massive fines and banned from serving on healthcare boards. Kara sat in the gallery and felt nothing like triumph, just a hollow certainty that justice delayed was still just delayed pain, not healing. But outside the courthouse, something else was happening. Nurses had gathered, hundreds of them, from hospitals across the state. They held signs thanking Kara, sharing their own stories, demanding reform. News cameras captured it all, a movement building in real time, sparked by one woman who'd refused to accept that saving lives was punishable. Jenny found Kara in the crowd and hugged her hard. You did it. You actually did it. We did it. All of us. No. Jenny pulled back, her eyes bright. You started it. The rest of us just followed your lead. Over the next month, the ripple effects became visible. 3 hospitals implemented voluntary staffing reforms preemptively, afraid they'd be next under investigation. The State Nursing Association used the Cedar Valley case as leverage to push for mandatory safe staffing legislation. Medical schools started teaching case studies on institutional failure and whistleblower protection, and Kara started her new job. The nursing advocacy office was small, just her, a paralegal named Rita, and an administrative assistant, but they had subpoena power and a mandate from the governor to clean up healthcare practices statewide. The first complaint came within 48 hours. A nurse at a suburban hospital reporting retaliation for questioning unsafe patient loads. Kara reviewed the documentation, cross-referenced state regulations, and sent a formal inquiry to the hospital's CEO. The hospital implemented changes within a week. The second complaint came from a rural facility where nurses were being pressured to work through breaks and off the clock. Kara showed up unannounced, reviewed time records, and found systemic wage theft amounting to hundreds of thousands. She referred it for criminal prosecution. Word spread fast. The nursing advocacy position wasn't symbolic. It had teeth. And the nurse running it wasn't interested in compromise when it came to patient safety. Kara worked 12-hour days building cases, reviewing complaints, educating nurses about their rights. She went home exhausted but purposeful, the kind of tired that comes from doing work that matters. Mia noticed the difference immediately. You smile more now, she said one evening over dinner. I do? Yeah, like you're happy instead of just okay. Kara realized it was true. She was fighting the same battles, but from a position of strength instead of desperation. She had authority, resources, backup. She could create change instead of just surviving cruelty. 6 months into the job, she got a call from Commander Graves. CMRI still has that position open if you want it. Kara was surprised. I thought that was closed after the investigation. It was, but you're cleared now, proving yourself in a different arena. The offer stands if you want to take it. Kara thought about it. High-stakes medicine, deployment work, the adrenaline rush of crisis response. Part of her missed it. The part that ran toward emergencies instead of away. Thank you, but I think I'm where I need to be. Saving lives from a desk instead of the field. Saving systems instead of individuals. It's different work, but it matters just as much. Graves was quiet for a moment. You know what? You're probably right. Take care of yourself, Kara. And if you ever change your mind, you know where to find me. That evening, Kara sat on her apartment balcony watching the sunset and thinking about how far she'd come from the exhausted nurse sleeping in her car, terrified of being late to a shift that was slowly killing her. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Kara Mitchell? Speaking. This is Nurse Supervisor Emma Garrett from Riverside County Medical. I have a situation. A doctor ordered a medication dose that's going to kill the patient if I give it. I questioned it, and he threatened to have me fired for insubordination. I don't know what to do. Kara sat up straighter, her pulse quickening. This was why the position existed, this exact moment. Don't give the medication. Document everything, the order, your concern, his threat. Then call me back in 5 minutes with the patient's chart number and the doctor's name. I'm about to make a phone call that's going to change how your hospital handles provider accountability. She hung up and immediately called the hospital's CEO. Had him on the line within 60 seconds despite the late hour. Explained the situation in terms that made liability exposure very clear. The doctor was suspended pending review. The patient lived. Nurse Garrett kept her job. And Kara went to bed that night knowing she'd saved a life without performing a single medical procedure. The work continued. Complaints rolled in, some legitimate, some not, all requiring investigation. Kara built a reputation for being fair but unyielding, willing to work with hospitals that engaged in good faith, but ruthless with those that didn't. She testified before the state legislature on safe staffing bills. She trained nurses on whistleblower protections. She built a network of advocates across the state who could mobilize when systemic problems needed public pressure. And slowly, incrementally, things began to change. Not everywhere, not completely. The healthcare system was too big, too broken, too invested in profit to transform overnight. But in hospitals across the state, administrators started thinking twice before retaliating against nurses who spoke up, because they knew someone was watching now, someone with authority and a personal understanding of what it costs to fight back. 1 year after the trial, Kara received an invitation to speak at a national nursing conference. The topic, From Victim to Advocate, Turning Personal Trauma into Systemic Change. She almost declined. Public speaking terrified her. But then she remembered Jennifer Reed's words about the next nurse who'd need to know fighting back was possible. She accepted. The conference was in Chicago, 3,000 nurses from across the country. Kara stood backstage listening to her introduction, the airport rescue, the suspension, the trial, the new advocacy position, and felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that came before every emergency. She walked on stage to thunderous applause and looked out at a sea of faces. Nurses who were exhausted, beaten down, trapped in the same system she'd escaped. Nurses who needed hope. She told them her story. Not the sanitized version, but the real one. The terror of losing her job, the shame of being publicly destroyed, the temptation to take the settlement and disappear, and the decision to fight instead, even though it was brutal and uncertain. I'm not special, she said. I'm not braver or stronger than any of you. I just reached a point where I couldn't live with myself if I stayed quiet. And I got lucky. I had people who fought alongside me. But here's what I learned. The system counts on us being too scared to fight back. It counts on isolation, exhaustion, and fear. The moment we refuse to be isolated, the moment we stand together and say not anymore, everything changes. She talked about the advocacy office, about how complaints from nurses had triggered investigations that shut down unsafe practices at 17 hospitals, about legislation pending that would mandate safe staffing ratios statewide, about the network of nurse advocates building in every major city. You don't have to be a hero, she concluded. You just have to refuse to be silent, document everything, connect with other nurses, report unsafe conditions, and know that there are people fighting for you now. You're not alone anymore. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Afterward, nurses lined up to talk to her, share their stories, ask for advice, get contact information for their state's advocacy resources. Kara talked to each one, hearing echoes of her own experience in their voices. One nurse, Young, maybe 26, still idealistic, asked the question that mattered. Was it worth it? Everything you lost, everything you went through, would you do it again? Kara thought about Mia, thriving in her new school, proud of her mother instead of resenting her absence. Thought about the patients who were alive because nurses felt safe reporting unsafe conditions. Thought about the system that was slowly, painfully learning that consequences were real. Yes, she said, every single time, because some things are worth fighting for, even when the cost is brutal. She flew home the next day and walked into her office to find Rita waiting with an urgent expression. We have a problem. Big one. What kind of problem? Anonymous tip. Major hospital corporation owns 14 facilities statewide, allegedly running a scheme to manipulate nurse staffing ratios during state inspections. They inflate numbers temporarily, pass inspection, then cut back. The tip includes internal memos and staffing spreadsheets. Kara felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. How credible is the source? Very. They sent documentation that checks out. This is systematic fraud across multiple hospitals affecting thousands of patients. Kara sat down at her desk and opened the file Rita handed her. Read through the evidence methodically, saw the pattern emerging. This wasn't one corrupt director. This was corporate policy. Calculated, deliberate endangerment for profit, scaled across an entire health system. Start building the investigation file, Kara said quietly. I need to make a call. She dialed the Attorney General's direct line. Reese answered immediately. Tell me you're calling with good news. I'm calling because we just uncovered evidence of corporate healthcare fraud that makes Cedar Valley look like jaywalking, and I need your authorization to go after them with everything we have. There was a pause. Then, send me what you've got. If it's as bad as you say, we're going to need federal involvement. Kara hung up and looked at Rita. This is going to be ugly. Good, Rita said fiercely. It should be. But across town, in a corporate boardroom where decisions were made in terms of quarterly earnings and shareholder value, someone had just received a very different phone call. A warning that the nurse who'd destroyed Cedar Valley Regional was now asking questions about their operation. And they were already planning their response. The response came 48 hours later, delivered not through lawyers but through the media, a calculated strike designed to destroy Kara's credibility before the investigation could gain momentum. Summit Healthcare Corporation issued a press release at 6 a.m., timed to hit morning news cycles across the state. The statement accused Kara Mitchell of harassment, overreach, and politically motivated witch hunts against legitimate healthcare providers. They claimed her advocacy office was operating beyond its legal authority, that she was pursuing vendettas rather than protecting patients, and that her personal history of conflict with Cedar Valley Regional had created bias that disqualified her from objective oversight. The release included carefully selected quotes from concerned healthcare professionals, suggesting Kara was unstable, vindictive, and using her position to settle personal scores. It referenced her ex-husband's custody claims, sealed court documents that should never have been public, implying her judgment was compromised. And it was accompanied by a formal complaint to the state ethics board demanding her removal from the advocacy position. Kara read it standing in her kitchen, coffee going cold in her hand, while Mia ate breakfast and pretended not to notice her mother's hands shaking. They're trying to do it again, Mia said quietly. Kara looked at her daughter. What? Destroy you for doing the right thing, like before. Mia set down her spoon, her young face serious. Are you going to let them? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kara's phone exploded with calls. Daniel, Marcus, Reese, reporters demanding comment. She ignored all of them and dialed Rita instead. Tell me you're not backing down, Rita said immediately. I need you to pull every document we have on Summit Healthcare. Every complaint, every inspection report, every piece of correspondence. I want a timeline of their operations for the past 5 years. Already started. What else? Call the anonymous tipster. Tell them we're moving forward regardless of pressure. See if they have more evidence they haven't shared yet. Done. Kara, they're going scorched earth on this. Summit has unlimited resources and political connections. This isn't Cedar Valley. This is bigger. Good. Let's see how they handle losing on a national stage instead of a local one. She hung up and called Reese. "I'm not resigning," Kara said without preamble. "I didn't think you would. But I need to know, is there anything in their allegations that's true? Anything they can use against you?" "My ex-husband tried to claim I was unstable during our custody battle. The judge rejected it completely and awarded me full custody. Summit somehow got sealed court records to weaponize it. That's a legal acquisition of confidential documents. I'll have the AG's legal team file a motion." Reese's voice was hard. "But Kara, you need to understand what you're up against. Summit Healthcare is a $2 billion corporation with 14 hospitals and political influence in the state capital. They've already called 3 legislators demanding your office be defunded. Then I guess we better move fast before they succeed." Kara spent the next 72 hours building a case that would either vindicate her completely or end her career in flames. Rita worked 18-hour shifts pulling documentation. The anonymous tipster, who turned out to be a Summit Regional Nursing Director with 20 years inside the corporation, came forward with 3 additional boxes of evidence. Her name was Dr. Valerie Chen, and she met Kara in a parking garage like they were in a spy thriller, her face gray with stress and determination. "They're going to destroy me for this, doctor," Chen said, handing over the boxes. "But I can't watch them kill any more patients for quarterly earnings." Inside was a roadmap of corporate malfeasance. Emails from executive leadership explicitly ordering staffing cuts below safe levels, internal memos discussing how to manipulate state inspection schedules, financial projections that literally budgeted for wrongful death settlements as an acceptable cost of business. One email made Kara's blood run cold. Summit's CFO to the CEO. Nursing overtime costs are impacting margins. Implement aggressive management to reduce by 40%. Legal estimates will see 3 to 5 additional adverse outcomes annually, but settlement costs are less than staffing expenses. Net positive to bottom line. They'd calculated that killing patients was cheaper than properly staffing hospitals. Kara photographed every page, uploaded everything to secure servers with multiple backups, and called Reese at midnight. "I'm sending you something that's going to make your career. How fast can you convene a grand jury?" The investigation exploded across state and federal jurisdictions simultaneously. Reese brought in the FBI for healthcare fraud. The Department of Health and Human Services launched a Medicare audit. The state medical board opened emergency proceedings. And Kara went on offense. She scheduled a press conference for 10 a.m. the following Monday, coordinating with Reese to ensure the timing wouldn't compromise the criminal investigation. News outlets from across the country sent crews. The story had everything: corporate corruption, patient deaths, a whistleblower seeking justice. Kara stood at a podium in the state capitol press room, flanked by Dr. Chen and Attorney General Reese, and laid out the evidence methodically. Summit Healthcare Corporation has spent 5 years systematically understaffing hospitals to maximize profit. They've falsified inspection reports, retaliated against nurses who reported safety concerns, and deliberately created conditions that resulted in preventable patient deaths. The evidence is comprehensive, documented, and damning. She displayed slides showing the internal emails, the staffing manipulation schemes, the financial calculations treating human lives as acceptable losses. Summit's response to this investigation was to attack my credibility, leak my sealed personal records, and attempt to have me removed from my position. They did this because they know what's coming: federal criminal charges, state regulatory sanctions, civil liability in the hundreds of millions. They wanted to discredit me before the evidence destroyed them. The reporters erupted with questions. Kara answered each one calmly, precisely, letting the facts carry the weight. One reporter asked the question that mattered. "Ms. Mitchell, Summit is claiming you're biased because of your experience at Cedar Valley. How do you respond?" Kara looked directly into the camera. "I'm biased toward patients living instead of dying. I'm biased toward nurses being able to do their jobs safely. I'm biased toward healthcare being about healing instead of profit extraction. If that disqualifies me, then the system is more broken than I thought." The press conference went viral within hours. Summit's stock dropped 12% in a single trading day. Major hospital associations rushed to distance themselves. Politicians who'd taken Summit campaign contributions suddenly had scheduling conflicts when reporters asked for comments. But Summit wasn't done fighting. 3 days later, they filed a federal lawsuit against Kara personally, alleging defamation, tortious interference with business relationships, and abuse of government authority. The damages sought were $50 million, a number designed to terrify her into silence. Marcus showed up at her apartment that evening, took one look at her face, and knew. They sued you. $50 million. They're going to take everything I have and everything I'll ever earn for the rest of my life. Only if they win, and they won't. You don't know that. Kara's voice was raw. Corporate lawsuits aren't about truth. They're about who can afford better lawyers and longer litigation. I have a government salary and a daughter to support. They have unlimited resources. Marcus sat down beside her on the couch. You remember what I told you the first time we met? That I'm very good at breaking things that need to be broken. Yes. Summit just made a critical tactical error. They went after you personally instead of the investigation. That means they're not confident in their legal position. They're trying to intimidate you into backing down. His smile was absolutely savage. I'm about to show them what happens when you threaten someone under Navy Special Warfare protection. Jennifer and I made some calls to other families whose loved ones you've helped through your advocacy work, patients who are alive because you investigated their hospitals, nurses who kept their jobs because you protected them. You've built an army without realizing it, Kara, and armies fight back. Within 48 hours, the counterstrike began. Jennifer Reed organized a coalition of families whose relatives had been patients at Summit facilities, over 300 people who'd experienced substandard care, preventable complications, or deaths they suspected were caused by understaffing. They filed a class action lawsuit against Summit for corporate negligence. The nurses' union representing Summit employees voted to authorize a strike unless the corporation immediately implemented safe staffing ratios and dropped the lawsuit against Kara. 1,200 nurses across 14 hospitals threatening to walk out simultaneously. Dr. Chen went on national television and detailed her 20 years inside Summit, explaining how she'd watched patient care deteriorate as profit margins became the only metric that mattered. Her interview was watched by 14 million people. And Marcus, who apparently had friends in the most unlikely places, got Senator Elizabeth Warren's office interested in Summit as a case study for healthcare reform legislation. Suddenly, Summit was facing congressional hearings. The pressure became unsustainable. Summit's board went into emergency session. Their stock was in free fall. Major donors were withdrawing hospital partnerships. Physicians were requesting transfers. The FBI had seized servers from corporate headquarters. 2 weeks after filing the lawsuit against Kara, Summit Healthcare Corporation announced a settlement. They would drop all legal action against Kara Mitchell immediately. They would implement comprehensive staffing reforms across all 14 hospitals, subject to independent oversight. They would establish a $50 million patient safety fund to compensate families affected by substandard care, and they would cooperate fully with federal and state investigations. The CEO resigned. The CFO resigned. 3 board members resigned. The corporation was effectively gutted from the top down. Kara read the settlement terms in Daniel's office, still not quite believing it. They surrendered, she said. They had no choice. You destroyed them so completely that settlement was their only option to survive at all. Daniel's smile was professional triumph. And the best part? The Patient Safety Fund. That was Jennifer Reed's idea. She insisted it be written into the settlement. Families are going to get compensated for what Summit did to them. Kara thought about the email she'd seen, the one calculating patient deaths as acceptable business costs, and felt something like justice settling into her bones. What happens to the criminal investigation? That continues regardless. Settlement doesn't buy immunity from federal prosecution. The executives who ordered the staffing cuts are still facing fraud charges. Daniel leaned back. You did it, Kara. You took on a multi-billion-dollar corporation and won. The victory tour happened organically. Nursing organizations invited Kara to speak. Medical ethics conferences wanted her perspective. Congressional staffers requested briefings on healthcare oversight reform. She became the face of a movement she hadn't meant to start. Nurses fighting back against systems that exploited their compassion and punished their courage. 6 months after the Summit settlement, Kara stood in front of the state legislature testifying in favor of mandatory safe staffing ratios. The bill had been blocked for years by hospital lobby pressure. Now, With Cedar Valley and Summit as cautionary tales, legislators were listening. This isn't about making healthcare more expensive, Kara told the committee. It's about acknowledging that patient care requires adequate staffing. We don't ask pilots to fly planes alone. We don't ask firefighters to fight fires solo. But we expect nurses to manage 16 critical patients simultaneously and somehow provide safe care. The evidence is clear. Proper staffing saves lives. Understaffing kills people. It's time we stop sacrificing patients for profit margins. The bill passed both chambers with bipartisan support. The governor signed it 3 weeks later, with Kara standing beside him during the ceremony. The law was nicknamed the Mitchell Act. Kara went home that evening and found Mia waiting with a hand-drawn card. Inside, her daughter had written, "I'm proud of you, Mom. You changed the world." Kara held her daughter and cried the way she'd needed to cry for months, relief and exhaustion and pride all tangled together. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," Kara said. "You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." "That's what family does," Mia said simply. "We save each other." The nursing advocacy position expanded. What started as Kara and 2 staff members grew into a statewide office with 12 investigators, dedicated legal support, and a budget that allowed real enforcement. Other states began replicating the model, creating their own advocacy offices based on the work Kara had pioneered. Dr. Chen joined Kara's team as a senior investigator, bringing her insider knowledge to bear on hospital oversight. Rita was promoted to deputy director. Jenny Cortez left hospital nursing entirely and became a field investigator, visiting hospitals to assess working conditions and interview staff. They built something that mattered, a system that protected nurses instead of punishing them, that prioritized patients over profits, that held hospitals accountable when they failed. It wasn't perfect. Corporate healthcare was too entrenched, too powerful to dismantle completely. But it was progress. Real, measurable progress that saved lives. 1 year after the Mitchell Act passed, Kara received an invitation to speak at a nursing school graduation. She almost declined. Public speaking still made her nervous. But the dean mentioned that several students had chosen nursing specifically because of Kara's story. She accepted. The auditorium was packed with new graduates in their ceremonial whites, faces bright with idealism and hope. Kara looked at them and saw herself at 22, before the system had taught her to keep her head down and survive. "You're entering a profession that will break your heart and remake it stronger," she told them. "You'll save lives and lose patients. You'll experience joy and trauma, often in the same shift. The system will try to grind you down, prioritize paperwork over people, and punish you for caring too much." She paused, letting that sink in. "But you have something we didn't have. You have protections. You have advocacy. You have a generation of nurses before you who fought to make things better. And you have the knowledge that fighting back is possible." She told them about the airport, not as a hero story, but as a moment of choice. "I didn't save Chief Petty Officer Reed because I'm special. I saved him because I couldn't live with myself if I walked away. That's all courage is, doing what you know is right even when the cost is brutal." She talked about the aftermath, the suspension, the public destruction, the temptation to accept settlement money and disappear. The easy path was available. I could have taken the money and the silence, but I kept thinking about the next nurse who'd face the same choice, the next patient who'd need someone brave enough to break bad rules and save their life. Her voice strengthened. "You're going to face those choices too. Moments where doing the right thing conflicts with policy, where patient safety requires breaking protocol, where speaking up means risking everything. And I need you to know you're not alone anymore. We built systems to protect you. We created laws to shield you. We established that nurses who prioritize patients over paperwork will be defended, not destroyed." She looked across the sea of young faces. The healthcare system is still broken in fundamental ways. It still values profit over healing. It still grinds people down. But you have the power to change that. One patient at a time, one shift at a time, one moment of courage that ripples out and changes everything. The graduates gave her a standing ovation that lasted until Kara had to wave them quiet. Afterward, a young woman approached, barely 23, nervous and determined. "Ms. Mitchell, I was supposed to go into investment banking. That's where the money is. But I watched what you did and I realized I wanted to do something that actually mattered. So I'm here instead." Kara took her hands. It's going to be hard. Harder than banking. The pay is worse and the hours are brutal. I know, but at the end of my life, I want to look back and know I helped people. That I stood for something, like you. Kara felt something crack open in her chest. Not pain, but the opposite. The knowledge that her fight had inspired others to choose courage. That her story had become permission for others to fight their own battles. Then welcome to the profession, Kara said. We're lucky to have you. That evening, Kara sat on her apartment balcony watching the sunset, Mia doing homework at the table behind her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Turn on Channel 7. She grabbed the remote and found a special investigation segment. Where are they now? The nurses who changed healthcare. The reporter tracked down the 9 nurses who'd quit Cedar Valley in protest. All of them had thriving careers, some at better hospitals, some in advocacy work, one running a nonprofit focused on nurse mental health. Every single one credited Kara with showing them that fighting back was possible. The segment ended with recent footage of Cedar Valley Regional. The hospital had been acquired by a nonprofit health system, completely restructured, and was now considered a model for patient-centered care. The new CEO gave a statement acknowledging past failures and committing to never repeat them. Director Hastings appeared in Prison Orange, serving year 4 of her sentence, declining interview requests. The reporter concluded, one nurse's decision to save a life and her refusal to be punished for it created ripple effects that transformed healthcare across an entire state. Kara Mitchell proved that individual courage can challenge institutional corruption. And in doing so, she inspired a generation of healthcare workers to demand better. Kara turned off the television and sat in silence, processing the weight of it all. Mia appeared at her shoulder. You okay? Yeah, baby, I am. That was pretty cool, seeing what you started. I didn't start anything. I just refused to stop. Same thing, Mia said with the wisdom of a child who'd watched her mother transform from victim to victor. You taught me that standing up matters, even when it's scary. Kara pulled her daughter close. You taught me that having something worth protecting makes you braver than you knew you could be. They sat together as the sun disappeared below the horizon. Mother and daughter, survivors and fighters, proof that broken systems could be challenged and changed by people who refused to accept cruelty as inevitable. Kara's phone buzzed one more time. An email from Commander Graves. We're expanding CMRI's civilian nursing program. Still want you if you're interested. No pressure, just keeping the door open. Kara looked at the offer, thought about high-stakes medicine and deployment work, and the adrenaline rush of crisis response. Part of her would always miss that, the part that ran toward emergencies. But she was doing something different now, something that mattered in a different way. She was preventing emergencies by fixing the systems that created them. She typed a response. Thank you for keeping the door open. I'm where I need to be. But I know some excellent nurses who might be perfect for your program. Let me make some calls. Because that was what it was really about. Not individual heroism, not one person saving the day, but building networks, creating systems, lifting up others so they could fight their own battles from positions of strength instead of desperation. The movement Kara had sparked continued growing. Nurses across the country were organizing, demanding safe staffing, pushing for reform. Hospitals that had operated with impunity for decades were suddenly accountable. Patients who'd been treated as revenue streams were being recognized as human beings deserving dignity and care. It wasn't a revolution. It was evolution. Slow, grinding, incremental change that added up to something transformative. 3 years after saving Marcus Reed's life, Kara received one final recognition. The American Nurses Association presented her with their highest honor, the Nursing Excellence Award, at their national convention. She stood on stage in front of 8,000 nurses and accepted an award that felt like it belonged to all of them. This isn't mine, she said, holding the crystal trophy. This belongs to every nurse who ever spoke up, despite the risk. Every nurse who stayed late to comfort a dying patient, even though it meant unpaid overtime. Every nurse who fought back when the system tried to break them. She looked across the audience. We're not heroes. We're just people who chose a profession that demands everything and gives back heartbreak and meaning in equal measure. But we're people who refuse to accept that caring is punishable, who insist that patient safety matters more than profit margins, who understand that sometimes the only way to heal a broken system is to break silence. Her voice carried across the massive hall. I saved one man's life at an airport and got suspended for it, but that suspension exposed corruption that needed exposing, and the fight to clear my name became a fight to protect every nurse who comes after me. That's the real victory, not individual vindication, but systemic change. She raised the award. So this isn't for me, it's for us. Every single nurse who refuses to give up on the idea that healthcare should be about healing. Thank you for fighting alongside me. Thank you for believing that things can get better. And thank you for proving every single day that courage matters. The standing ovation lasted until security had to politely ask the audience to sit so the ceremony could continue. Kara walked off stage and found Marcus and Jennifer waiting backstage, his daughters, now 12 and 10, holding signs they'd made themselves. Thank you for saving our dad. Marcus hugged her tight. You know what the best part of all this is? What? I got to watch you go from the person who saved my life to the person who saved thousands of lives. That's pretty incredible. Jennifer stepped forward. Our girls are considering nursing school because of you, because you showed them that the profession means something. Kara looked at the two young girls, their faces bright with possibility, and felt the full weight of what had been built from one moment of choosing courage over compliance. The profession needs people like you, she told them. People who believe that caring for others is the most important work anyone can do. That night, back in her hotel room, Kara video called Mia, who was staying with Mrs. Chen for the weekend. How was the big award thing? Mia asked. Overwhelming. Good. Weird to be celebrated for just doing what felt necessary. That's kind of the point, though, right? You did what felt necessary even when everyone said you were wrong. That's why it matters. Kara looked at her daughter, 13 now, growing into someone confident and brave, and felt proud of everything they'd survived and built together. I love you, kiddo. You know that? I know. I love you too. Now go celebrate with your nurse friends. You earned it. Kara hung up and sat alone in the quiet hotel room, processing the journey from that terrifying moment in the airport to this recognition on a national stage. She thought about the patients who were alive, because hospitals had proper staffing now. The nurses who kept their jobs because retaliation carried consequences. The families who got answers instead of corporate spin when care failed. She thought about Rachel Hastings in prison, about Summit Healthcare's executives facing federal charges, about the systems that had seemed untouchable crumbling when confronted with documented truth and public outrage. And she thought about the future, the work that still needed doing, the hospitals that still cut corners, the nurses who still needed protection, the patients who still deserved better. The fight wasn't over. It would probably never be completely over. Institutional corruption was hydra-headed, always finding new ways to profit from people's suffering. But it could be fought, it could be challenged, it could be changed, slowly and incrementally, by people who refused to accept that cruelty was inevitable. Kara Mitchell had learned that the hard way, and she'd spend the rest of her career making sure other nurses learned it too, not through suffering, but through systems that protected them when they chose courage. She picked up her phone and sent one final email before bed. To the nursing school dean who'd invited her to speak at graduation, I'd be honored to serve on your advisory board. We need to train the next generation not just in clinical skills, but in advocacy. Let's talk about building that into the curriculum, because that was how real change happened. Not through individual heroism, but through institutional transformation. Teaching new nurses that their voices mattered, that patient safety required speaking up, that the system could be challenged and changed by people brave enough to try. Kara turned off the light and went to sleep in a hotel room 2,000 miles from home, knowing she'd wake up tomorrow and go back to work. Back to investigating complaints and building cases and protecting nurses who were just trying to do their jobs without being destroyed for caring too much. It was exactly where she needed to be. And somewhere in airports and hospitals across the country, nurses were going to work knowing that if they faced a crisis, if they had to make the choice between policy and patient, between following rules and saving lives, they wouldn't be alone. Someone had fought that battle before them and won. Someone had proven that doing the right thing, even at tremendous cost, was not just possible but essential. that someone was Kara Mitchell, a nurse who'd been suspended for saving a life and transformed that injustice into a movement that changed healthcare. Not a hero, just a person who refused to accept that compassion was punishable. And in the end, that refusal changed everything.